Uh, I'm going to depend on you guys to help me get through this day. Sleep was not something that happened a lot last night. There was some of it, so not as much as I would prefer. So we'll see how much my brain is functioning. If I fall asleep when we're meditating, don't hesitate, come up and tap me on the shoulder gently. No, it's happened. It's one of the more embarrassing things a meditation teacher can do. But um, yeah, I don't have any big plans today. Um, I mean, I plan to be in Little Rock today. Basically, that's my plan. Uh, and I realize I'm very close to the windows here. Uh, anyway, no tornado warnings right now, so we should be okay. They've all been canceled. They've been canceled. They canceled the tornadoes for today. Good. Um, anyway, I want to spend a fair amount of time and really focus the day kind of on meditation and working with that as part of our recovery, as part of our not just recovery, but kind of our healing on both the emotional and spiritual level, as well as actually the physical level. Um, and then, see what other things come up with you guys. And so I'll kind of, to some extent, I'll let you guys guide the themes of the day. I, there is a description of what I was going to do today, which I read last night, and it sounded good. You know, but we'll see if that actually happens. So I guess the gatekeepers are going to come in
Yes.
too. Maybe I'll talk a little bit about meditation before we start to sit. It's in some ways the longer I've practiced them, the more questions I've had about what's going on. When I started to meditate, which goes back to, I guess, when I first did any kind of meditation was 1978. So um, took up Buddhist practice in 1980. I had sort of magical ideas about what was going to happen, coming out of, I was a teenager in the 60s, and the Beatles were kind of my, idols, and I was a musician. So, when they started meditating with Maharishi and doing transcendental meditation, it sounded like something magical, that I was going to get into some kind of a sort of altered state, and it, probably in my mind, not really distinguishable from being high, right? Uh, so in some ways, it was kind of like, oh, it's a free high or something. But underneath that was also, my own emotional struggles. I mean, I struggle with depression, and that's pretty common in the recovery world. And I thought that I was always looking for an answer to that, something to fix that, right? I mean, when I started in therapy at actually quite young age in my teens, actually was in a mental hospital for an unusually long period of time. It turns out when you go, it's easy to get in, it's hard to get out. Because I mean, I'd been, you know, going through these cycles of depression and dropping out. I had dropped out of high school a couple times, and my father had very good insurance. He was a lawyer for the Bethlehem Steel Company, and so they put me into this private hospital, and they said it was going to be 2 weeks. But like I said, like it's easy to get in, but hard to get out, because to get out, you have to convince them that you're sane by their standards. And I was like 18, 19 in the late 60s, and just socially, culturally, my view of the world, I mean, didn't align with what they believed. And so I was there for a year, which is, and a lot of the time I was in this open section of the hospital where, like, when I got there, I'm in the open part of this hospital, and like, I was in Philadelphia, and we would just take the, train, whatever, downtown and go to concerts and get loaded and come back, and one night I'd smoked some bad stuff that set me into a paranoid, uh, you know, panic attack. And, I called my shrink. I'm having a heart attack. You have to send an ambulance. It's like, is there anybody there who can bring you back to the hospital? Anyway, that was quite a year, and basically at the end of it, I was like, well, therapy doesn't work. That was my conclusion from a year in a mental hospital. Like, well, that didn't work. And of course, by that time, I was getting high all the time and drinking a lot, and so that so in my quest to overcome, and I tell this story, I tell my story not to like focus on me, but I hope that you hear some element of your story, of your own struggle. Because I mean, if you're here, if you've gone through some kind of addiction or, issue that took you to a 12-step program, you've been through some stuff in your life. We all have. It's just, so there, I don't think of my story as being particularly unique. I mean, I like stories, right? So, and there are some good twists in my story, right? That keep you entertained. But the point is the underlying theme, which is suffering and trying to find a way out of suffering, and the confusion and the mistakes, and then hopefully, the freedom that comes with finding a path. But I was a long way from that, at 19 years old. When I turned 19, my father's insurance didn't work anymore. So then they let me go. So that's one way to get out, in case you're looking for a way out. Make sure your insurance, stop covering it, get out of here. Um, and I was in no better emotional condition, and really knew no more about myself. Um, I really, I mean, not to be, too much, editorializing about therapy, because I've benefited a lot from certain forms of therapy. But in my mind, until they came up with cognitive behavioral therapy, most of it wasn't that helpful for depressives, at least. Anyway, so for me, it's like there's this emotional thing that I identify as depression. I've come to even question that label, but I came out of my family. I was the youngest of 5 boys. Everybody except my father went through therapy in my family. So for me, even being able to say to myself, I'm depressed, when I was like 14 or 15, was a way of being a grown up. It's kind of sad, but like, because most people want to be a grown up by being responsible in the world or something. And for me, it was like, oh, I'm depressed. I must be that's like my coming of age. Now I'm like an adult. So, that language, because I've come to see that even the language we use to identify and think about what we feel actually has a big impact. And it's not like magical, like if I say it, I become it. But, when you keep telling yourself over and over that you're depressed, when you have an unpleasant feeling and a difficult emotional feeling, that's depressing, frankly, and so it becomes like a feedback loop. Like I would start to get into a bad mood, and instead of just thinking, oh, I'm having a bad morning, I'd be like, oh, I'm depressed now. And then this cloud comes over me, right? Anyway, so drinking was one, and drugging, and especially smoking marijuana really became sort of my maintenance drug, um, that I would do all day, and then I would drink at night. But that became one way of coping, right? And I will say, like, being a musician was one of the ways of coping, like, because when you do art, it's very healing, and uh, but also there was, through those years, into my 20s, this sense that maybe there was some kind of a spiritual solution, right? And that's where the sort of magical thinking about meditation came in, that I thought that would fix me, right? Which, that isn't how I view it, of course, now. But as I got into meditation, then in my late 20s, and the drinking and drugging continued, but, at least I would be sober when I was meditating, and I started going on retreats, and I wouldn't use on retreats. So I started to have glimmers of something else, but it certainly wasn't the magical fix that I wanted. You know, um, in some ways, when you start to meditate, it's like getting sober, and that at first things get worse, because like when you get sober, it's like, oh, now you're feeling everything, all the stuff that you were trying to suppress. And with meditation, it's like you're seeing your own mind, it's like, oh, I thought I was going to meditate and quiet my mind. Instead, it's like almost gets louder at first. And you have to learn how to work with it. But, and I know some of you have read One Breath at a Time, my first book, and that, and I describe how, like, after this one long retreat that I thought was supposed to be the one that really finally fixed me, and it didn't, that I wound up throwing everything in my life away and going off with this like new age guru who promised like this magical experience. It was like my final fling for like a spiritual fix that didn't work. And I wound up homeless, in the streets of Venice Beach, California. And at that point, I view it as like I was below my bottom, because I don't think at that point I could have gotten sober, or that it would have even helped. I needed to like put together some kind of a functional life before like getting sober made any sense, at least in my mind. And that took a couple of years. But like a lot of people, getting sober was like the last choice. It was like I tried everything else, right? And it wasn't that I thought, oh, now I figured out what my problem is. It was just, well, I've tried everything else, I'll try this. It's not going to work. I mean, but, and it worked, and starting to work a program and go by the very simple ideas of just keep showing up, and one day at a time, and not expecting magical transformation, right? I mean, that is just to me, that's such an addictive or so emblematic of an addictive mind that I need a quick fix. I need something that will just change me and turn me into a different person. And, getting sober and seeing like, I don't need to have a magically fixed life. What I need to do is just have like, be able to live, like a worker among workers, like we talk about, like it was that sense of humility of like, I don't have to become a rock and roll star, because that was my other fix in my mind. Like as a musician, oh, if I could just get rich and famous, then, you know, and realizing like that in a way, like I'd made life more complicated than it had to be. Like maybe just show up and have like an ordinary life. I mean, I remember the first time I got like a day job where you had benefits and, you know, vacation, and you get paid at the end of the week rather than like you don't know if the club owner is actually going to pay you after your gig, and it was like, and you have to get up in the morning, which was like one of my main reasons to not want to have a job all my life, which is still a problem actually. But, and I was like, this is really nice. You know, this is really nice just having this simple life. And so that I continued, and to this day, the feelings that I have identified over this lifetime as depression still show up at times. I don't even identify them in the same way, not all the time. Sometimes they're stronger and they kind of deserve that label, but it's like that became just a part of the landscape of my life rather than like the defining quality of who I was. And this is a very Buddhist idea, right? That of identity, of like taking on an identity. This is who I am, like when I was, before I got sober, it's like I'm a musician, and that identified me. And if I couldn't stop being a musician, because then I would stop having an identity, or, it didn't even make any sense for me to like stop being a musician. That would be like saying, I'm going to stop being a human being. It's like, that's just who I am. Right. But the thing is that I was trapped in that, because then I couldn't do anything else. And there were lots of other things I could have done. Right? Just one example. So, and I'm somebody who smokes pot all the time. And that's part of my identity, which even, I was thinking about this recently about how that, that was all tied up with, coming out of the 60s and being a rebel. And I didn't vote, because I didn't believe in the government, and, all that kind of stuff that just becomes an identity, and that you get trapped in. You think that this identity is freeing you. This is who I am, I'm a rebel, or I'm whatever. And then after a while, you realize, oh, like, now I'm just stuck in this. So that, this idea, because one of the messages that I always got from the feelings that I identified as depression was, you're helpless. There's nothing you can do. Right now, what you need to do is go lie down. Going to work or trying to get a job or trying to function, that you can't do that because you're depressed, right? I mean, that's how it started for me in high school. It's why I didn't get through high school. I just like stopped functioning because I felt the feeling was I can't function. So I believed that feeling. We have a saying in AA, feelings are not facts, right? Well, I believed those feelings. And I learned in sobriety to not believe them, to just be like, oh, I'm still going to get up and go to work, even though my feelings are saying, don't get up and go to work. You can't do that. You're depressed. So that for me, like, was the first real breakthrough in terms of changing my relationship to feelings and the things that the feelings that I think were the foundational to my addiction, to my addictive behavior, right? The feelings that I was trying to get rid of, the feelings that I was trying to solve, through therapy, through relationships, through being a musician, through whatever, through meditating. It's just to see I can have feelings and I can still be okay. That was a huge, like, insight for me. But what that influenced was my behavior. And that's a critical, part of life is behavior, obviously. But it's not the whole of our life, right? So, uh, you know, one of the distinctions I make between kind of Buddhist practice and recovery programs, and this is not a pure distinction, but to some extent, the 12 steps and other recovery programs are focused more on behavior. That's certainly the starting point. Stop doing the thing you're doing. Start doing, you know, smarter things. And what they say, you can't change wrong thinking through, well, I never can remember the expression, but it's about, like, you need to act your way into right thinking, right? Instead of thinking your way into right action. That's the expression, right? So that's actually the opposite of how Buddhism views things. Buddhism views things as it all starts with thinking. So they're not actually in conflict. It's just that when you change your behavior as an addict, you don't usually realize that your thinking about what you did had changed. You wouldn't have done it if you hadn't actually thought it. But anyway, not to get into the technicalities. So the way I see that process is, we start with this behavioral stuff to just kind of walk through all the things that our mind had blocked us from doing. But that's not all of recovery, right? And this is where I think at times, recovery programs can become limited if you just view it as a behavioral process, right? I mean, certainly the 12 steps do not suggest that it's simply behavioral, because they go very much into our thinking and our spiritual condition. And there's prayer, meditation, there's inventory. Spiritual awakening itself is more than just a behavioral thing, but that's where I think people, well, I'll put it in a positive way. The thing that kind of brings people to Buddhism, one of the things that can bring people to Buddhism, is when they realize they want to work on their inner life further than just the external stuff has changed. Their life is working, but there's still this inner turmoil, oftentimes inner critic or inner sense of hatred. That's a strong term, but that there isn't serenity, the serenity that's promised. And Buddhism kind of puts that out there as a potential, and that this practice can lead to that. I want to keep myself on the theme that I think I started with, which is feeling, like the depression and emotions, and how that. So, as I said, the behavioral stuff helped me get through when in the past I would have been blocked by my feelings. I just kept moving through the processes. But then the meditative, as my meditation practice deepened further and became not an effort at escape, but really an effort at growth and transformation and self-knowledge. That brought me into this direct relationship with feelings that I had never really had a direct relationship with. They existed, but they existed in my mind as sort of information. Like I feel this, but I'm not. But the feeling is there. But the main thing that I'm getting from it is a message that I need to behave in a certain way, or that things are really bad, or I'm miserable. It was just like the story was more dominant than actual awareness of what does that actually feel like. And that's a common problem, that we don't feel our feelings. And I would say this is common across humanity, but in the world of addicts, particularly a problem, because as I hope I've sort of made clear, my sense is that one of the main reasons we become addicts is because we don't want to feel. And we use our addictive behavior to suppress or get away from or turn off our feelings. And so the idea of turning toward, and I won't say embracing, but really connecting with and being fully present with feelings is frightening. It scares us. And frankly, I find it frightening to this day. And I still have to kind of take a breath and relax and allow myself to let down the barriers to feeling before I can start to connect with it. But that's way more advanced isn't the right word, but it's way ahead of where I was when I started to do this work, which was, what am I feeling? And that's the question I get when I kind of get into this work around feeling, which is a big theme in my teaching. It's like, how do I feel? What is feeling? Maybe that'll become I mean, it is, if you look at what I said today was going to be about, which was like essentially about healing. That's what I think this is about. It's about learning to hold feelings, to not run from them, to let them in without being overwhelmed, uh, to fully be alive. And so that required more than a behavioral process, but this is a meditative process. And it, when we get into meditation, the first challenge most people are faced with is there's a lot of thoughts going on. And the guidance is usually pay attention to your breath, or it could be a mantra or something, but don't let go of your thoughts and just come back to the breath. But this can become kind of a practice from the neck up, meaning I'm sitting here, I'm paying attention to my breath, and then I have a thought. I'm like, oh, I'm having a thought. Oh, maybe, that might be going on for 5 minutes or 5 seconds, but at some point I go, oh, I'm thinking. I'm not supposed to be thinking. I'm supposed to be paying attention to my breath. Let me come back to my breath. And so that's just like this ping pong, right? And it's ignoring everything below the neck, which is where the action is in my mind. Because this is where the emotional world really lives. It shows up, it manifests in the mind, in the thought process. But the thoughts are really the last expression of feelings, very much like a plant. Like the thoughts are like the flower, but the feelings have the roots the stem that holds and carries all that stuff, and that energy then manifests as, oh, I'm such an idiot, or what's wrong with me, or it's their fault, and all that stuff, the story, right? But the story is the last stop in this cognitive process that starts with just these underlying feelings. And those feelings, of course, have a long history because, we started having feelings pretty much who knows when we started having it, but very early in our lives. And as we become more conscious, and I'm talking about like childhood and, and really probably infancy, but childhood, and we start to get language, we start to form these ideas. And just like I said, we name things, right? It becomes anxiety, it becomes depression, it becomes anger, it starts to take on these identities. And we carry those blocks of meaning around in our head and never really see the components that they're made up with. So meditation, in a sense, is a deconstruction of our experience. I'm not becoming now too out there with this, but it's like, we ask these questions like, what is this? What am I experiencing? Like, that's like a basic question of meditation. What am I experiencing? And, on the surface, we'll say, well, I'm experiencing a thought. But then you say, okay, what's underneath that thought? Oh, there's a feeling. Well, what's that made up of? Well, there's a physical component, and then there's something else that I think becomes very difficult to label because it's not really, there isn't a story. The story is built out of it. It's like, looking at, I don't know if this makes any sense, but, you read a story and then you go, well, what's the story made up of? And eventually you realize, well, it's made up of words, and words are made up of letters. Well, that sound has meaning, right? For us. We understand it to mean something.
So low rock could just mean we got some water happening. It's a flash flood. Yeah, she's a flood warning.
Oh, and we're a high ground here, right?
You notice none of us panicked.
And do we have a person that's monitoring the weather? No.
Oh, dear.
Yeah, there's so many levels that we don't know when the village should go on the ground. Sorry, probably ours.
I think, we're okay if it's a flood, right? It's the tornado we would worry about. If there's a tornado, we'll go into the, oh, you guys know where we're going. Okay. So.
We should go downstairs.
Sounds perfect.
We follow you until then, and you follow.
And we'll keep breathing when we go downstairs. Stay mindful. Well, I was just getting to the good part. So, right. So actually, this isn't a bad metaphor that, a story, when we read a story, it's like we look, it's a story, we read it, but then you say, well, what's it made up of? And you say it's made up of words. Okay. And the individual words have meaning, right? But then you go, well, what are the words made up of? It's made up of letters. Well, tell me, what do those letters mean? Well, they don't mean, they're just letters. They don't have meaning. And when you get down to your raw feelings, it's the same thing. You build meaning out of your feelings and out of not just your own feelings, but the information that you're given about feelings. The world tells you, and your family tells you, and different inputs tell you to put a label on certain types of feelings. So the way if I feel like, oh man, oh, I know that that's called fear, and that then like there's variations on that aren't like panicky, but that are kind of this like nervousness that I call anxiety. And then there's this one that's like, oh, and I've learned to call that depression. And it might be like, and that's just like sadness. And we start to see like, okay, these, this is great. I can't wait to go back to California and tell everybody about Arkansas. Don't go there. Beautiful place, lovely people. Don't go there. Earthquakes are better. So we start to see that if we just break down what we're feeling into what I think of them as energetic states, because an energetic state doesn't have a positive or negative quality to it. It's just energy, right? That kind of works for me. That when I tune in to what I'm feeling, and then I can say, oh, that energetic state has a certain kind of tone or color or something, that it's like, it's inclining toward this. Then when I feel it, I'm able to just go, okay, it's a feeling, and I don't go anywhere with it. Because when I put a name on it, and I'm coming back to how I started this, when I put a name on it, it starts to have meaning. And when it has meaning, that triggers a whole feedback loop. Because when I say I'm depressed, that has a story that goes back to my being 14 years old. And now I've awakened that story. And along with it comes, that's how I wound up in the mental hospital. That's how I became an addict. That's how all my relationships fell apart. When I'm depressed, I can't function. No, and so there's this fear, and then there's a sadness, a regret, and now this whole bundle of emotions starts feeding back, because every time I have a thought that's like about how bad this is, that makes me feel worse. And then that extra bad feeling makes me have more bad thoughts. And that's the feedback loop, right? Between feelings and thoughts. They just start to build up until it becomes just this all-encompassing experience, which then like everything becomes colored by that. I really didn't mean to talk for this long about this, but or about anything. Actually, I was going to start by meditating, but once I got started, I felt like I needed to. So there's more to this. I guess there's two other things I'll say, and then I really do think we got to meditate. One of the functions of memory, one of the vital functions, maybe the most important function of memory for human beings, is that we learn that we learn, right? Okay, let's just put it at that. And so when you have a certain kind of feeling, when you have a certain experience, what your mind tends to do is remember other times you've had that experience, so you know how to handle that situation, right? You get in the car, it's like, I've been in a car before, I know how this works, right? I mean, more specifically, you know, you hear the siren and you know what that represents. So it's like, but when you hear that, maybe you think about when your car was destroyed by a tornado last time. And so it's not just that you're realizing there could be a tornado now, you're thinking about the tornadoes from the past and how you should handle this. Now, if the thing that you experience is, let's say, anxiety, then what you remember in that moment is past times of being anxious. If it's depression, what you remember is past times of being depressed. So then you start thinking about those past experiences that trigger more of that feeling. And then all that you can remember is bad stuff, the painful past, because you're not remembering how happy you are, because that memory isn't helpful to you right now, according to your, evolutionary, mind, the way the brain works. The brain is trying to help you to navigate this kind of situation. And what you believe, what you know about this situation is that it's miserable, And so now all you can remember is bad stuff. You feel bad. You're having bad thoughts. I'm just saying bad as a, very literal, and eventually the world becomes a bad place. Your life becomes bad. There's nothing, you don't see any light. And this is when you get clinically, caught up in these states where you're overwhelmed with it because you can't break out of it. You can't see any other reality. And so that's the end game of when this takes over. Again, this is just my experience and how I've come to understand it. It'd be, I never really sat down with a psychologist who is an expert on this and tried to say, what do you think about this? Anyway, because this is, combining Western psychology with Buddhism, basically, is what I'm kind of doing here. So in that moment, I need to talk about the antidote so we aren't just stuck in this reality, right? So, and I've taken you there somewhat, which is our meditation practice says, okay, step out of the story, the construct, step out of the memories. All of this is like, let go of the thought, right? Come back to the breath. But don't just come back to the breath, come back to the body, come back to the feeling, be with the raw energy, be with the letters, be with the most basic component, the atomic component of your feeling. Breathe with that. Now, that is going to be an unpleasant experience. But, and this is, the Buddha talks about feeling, not in the emotional terms we use, but as feelings are just pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral on this core level, on this energetic level. That's just all they are. So you go, well, this is unpleasant. And it's okay. I'm not drowning or dying or, nothing really bad is happening except there's an unpleasant feeling. One of the other tricks of our mind, and these are the things that we kind of learn through practice, but is that our mind latches on to experiences and thinks of everything as permanent, right? This is one of the delusions of the human mind. We forget that things are constantly changing. Things appear to be solid. But when you have that feeling where the fear creeps in, is like, oh no, this is going to last forever. Or even if it's going to last for a week, I can't stand having this feeling. I can breathe with this unpleasant feeling for a minute, but I don't know how long I can handle this unpleasant feeling. And so the cognitive reminder, the insight from Buddhism is everything is impermanent. This is not, even though it feels like, oh my God, I'm being captured by this thing, you're not. It's just a feeling. This is again why I like the word energy, because when you think of energy, immediately you think of something that's moving. Energy isn't static. It's not like a block of energy. It's in motion, right? And when you tune into feeling before it becomes a story and gets a name, you see that it's not static. You feel it's moving. It's not steady. So what we do with our minds in that moment is we go, okay, it's okay. It's like self-compassion or loving kindness, just a simple, I'm actually okay. And this is an impermanent experience. I don't have to be afraid of it, so I can hang out with it. And that's how, like, I get through these things that in the past would blow up into stories and behaviors, right? Harmful behaviors, self-destructive behaviors, by just turning toward feeling, being with it as an energetic state, breathing with it, staying with it on this nonverbal level. And it's quite interesting that it becomes this really like, wow, that's not what I thought it was. And a lot of problems can be bypassed in our lives just by operating on this level. So this is, if I, you know, if and I'll try to sort of wrap this up by saying, if our addiction came out of, at least partially came out of, an inability to be with feelings, then this is the Buddhist part of working with that. To me, that, as I said before, the 12-step part is the more the behavioral part of continuing to function through it. But the Buddhist part says, yeah, I can function, but I can actually like have in a sense, a transformative experience where I change my whole relationship to this. And in changing that relationship, the thing itself changes. Because no longer is it this solid demon that captures me. It's just an energetic state that comes and goes. And so between those two things, the behavioral and the meditative, this is where what I consider, serenity, peace comes, is changing our relationship to our whole, it's, or I'll say our emotional world, but it's actually pre-emotional. These feelings that I'm talking about aren't actually emotions until we infuse them with meaning. So that was, wow. I guess I really need to hear from you guys, and because I think what we're going to do, maybe hear from you a bit, then I think we'll take a break, and then finally we'll meditate. I mean, I didn't even meditate this morning, which is very unusual for me, but anyway. So how did that land? Was it clear? Was it confusing? Yeah.
Say for solving the state would be great.
Thank you. I trust in the Dharma.
Like after you come out of meditation, after you have a direct experience with these energetic states or sensations, and you come out of meditative state, how do you interpret? You have to probably interpret what you were sensing, or you don't have to. But that's, I guess, is that where you give meaning to what you were sensing and journal or whatever those things are that you do. Because, is that where that happens? And it's so tempting when you're in meditation is to, is to do the interpretation then.
So first of all, I don't actually think of this process as strictly happening in meditation. I think that the sensitivity to be able to actually feel on this more atomic level develops in meditation, but then you can carry it once you learn how to connect, in other words, become mindful of feeling of on this level, then it's something that you can carry outside of meditation. So I don't separate it quite so distinctly. And so I don't think of a divide. There isn't a time when I think, oh, now I'm going to think about how I'm depressed, but I'm not calling it that. I try to maintain this attitude that throughout my because the deep conditioning to identify things and to reify feelings and turn them into emotions and stories and is not something that I've uprooted. And so it's a back and forth. Like it doesn't there's almost like this constant temptation to fall into that story. And so I need to more or less continuously practice like, okay, step, breathe. That's why for me, like mindful breathing isn't just something I do when I'm meditating, but it's something I need to do, throughout my life. So I don't think of it like, oh, now I'm going to write down and process what I just went through, because that's again sort of accept what I just described to you, right? And this has been a long-term process of coming to understand this and be able to verbalize what I'm talking about. But in terms of my applying it, I'm applying it as much as a nonverbal thing as possible. I don't really want to sit down and start writing about it because that's turning it back into a thing that I'm trying to avoid having it be a thing. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question.
That's a good place to go.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
I'm going to piggyback on that. So when you said interpretation, I'm thinking maybe what you're talking about is more investigation. Interpretation is investigation is a big part of this canon, but interpretation is then you get into the reification process. Maybe is that helpful?
Well, yeah, and but I think investigation, is kind of the technical term that I describe for a lot of what that I'd use to describe that I'd use for what I just described. We just have to be careful that, like, when we think of investigation, there's a tendency to think, oh, I'm going to find the answer, and so investigation just means, in this case, just being very present with, seeing the letters, looking closely enough that you actually see the letters. Because typically, we pick up the book and we don't see the letters. We don't really think about the words. We read it all as a story, as a construct, and then we do notice sometimes we get stuck on a word, or we notice a word, but we're not really thinking about the words either. We're just following the words to find what's the meaning And that's like this end point, right? And with emotions, when we put meaning on them, that's where all the problems start. I feel this because of my mother. I feel this because I'm a bad person. I feel this because of the trauma I experienced. And then it's a story. And that can be useful. There's a place for that work, but that's not what this process is about. Because oftentimes that process is a way of keeping, one step away from the actual experience, Yeah.
What about curiosity instead of investigation?
Yeah.
The idea of investigation to me is a little bit of rigidity and looking deeper and being authentic. But curious can be sort of almost a frivolous enjoyment.
Yeah, I think that's a good, useful term. And yeah, I'm not much one for telling people how to do things. I'm taking apart a process, but it's something that people have to feel their own way into, and part of that is languaging it. If you don't mind me turning it down into a verb, which can be annoying, but anyway, what's the language that works for you? And the way you find out what language works for you is you notice, what do you feel when you hear that word? And so that's why attuning to feeling is like so key here. Yeah.
When you look at the energy state and our capacity to start getting more attuned to when that's starting to rise up.
Yeah.
Do you think it's more helpful to just be with it and stay with it, or perhaps we could learn to shepherd it in one direction or another that's more wise or less wise?
That's a really good question. Thank you. And this is where, becoming skilled in practice comes in. Because there's absolutely ways and times when you can, one of the phrases I like, incline the mind in certain directions, cultivate certain qualities. We practice loving kindness. We're trying to cultivate this quality. And the risk in that is that that effort becomes a grasping. And in the Buddhist principle, foundational principle of Buddhism is that grasping causes suffering. And so this is, again, a place where you attune, well, what am I feeling right now? And can I turn it a little in this direction? Or what happens when I do that? Because not only can there be a grasping, there can also be this aversion, like, I want to get away from this. And I know that if I repeat these words, or if I count my breaths, or some sort of trick that I've learned that usually only works temporarily, but we start to think it's the way, oh, that'll help me to go there. And we start trying to manipulate the experience. So it's a subtle place to work, and really kind of almost, I think in a lot of ways, the key place that we have to work with in meditation, which is what is right effort. Can I, am I just letting myself sink into some doldrums and being mindful of like, okay, I'm mindful that I'm falling asleep. And it's like, that's not really helpful. But, let me go have another cup of coffee and, okay, I'm staying awake, that's not really helpful either. So how do I navigate all that? So, the Buddhist term, the middle way, and to kind of to check that. So this is an ongoing process. Mindfulness is at the heart of all of this. Is like, what am I doing? What's happening from what I'm doing? Am I creating tension, and am I moving towards letting go, or am I moving toward grasping? And this is why meditation is this is the challenge of meditation. We think that the challenge of meditation is to stop thinking. That's the like standard sort of initial idea that people get in their minds. That's not the challenge of meditation. The challenge of meditation is navigating skillfully the different mind states and energetic states that arise and responding to them skillfully. And there isn't one answer to that, right? There isn't a right or a wrong way to do it, because every moment has its, unique blend of qualities. And so you practice meditation and you have your own experience. You listen to teachers, you read books, you think about it. And so that you're bringing these the different knowledge and different experiences and kind of levels of intuition and sensitivity into each moment, and then trying to respond skillfully. And sometimes you do something that really, that was just the right thing. And other times, you get stuck in a place and it's like, well, that's just the way it is. We don't have control over our feelings or our minds. We have some influence over them. We're not helpless, but as the 12-step language, we're powerless. But as I like to say, we're powerless, but we're not helpless. Like there's certain things we aren't in control, but we aren't just victims either. So it's like, how do I work with that balance of effort and letting go? That's a big question.
Our friend Terry, in Heber Springs, Arkansas, says, for me, I'm just starting to look at the emotions that trigger thoughts. I've read a few books recently. The body keeps the score. What happened to you? So there's a mind-body connection. CBT and EMDR are valuable tools along with mindfulness practice.
Yeah. I mean, I don't really know anything about EMDR. I've heard about it. Like I'm tracking eye movement or something. Like,
If you want
that's okay. I mean I just am like, yeah, whatever works. Yeah.
You're addressing loving kindness at some point this weekend.
I'll address it anytime you want.
Well, I mean, if not, because I'll have a question, because when I try to do the meta, but I think it comes back to that core. I don't feel anything.
Right.
And everything you're saying today is hitting me dead center and giving me encouragement just to keep going. But I'm not the only one, because I don't feel love towards anybody. The dog died. That's the last one. But you're helping. Thank you.
You don't feel love towards anybody?
See, you're making me feel strange because I don't.
I can't make you feel anything.
Well, I'm feeling strange.
If I could.
Yes. I feel it. I think I'm that blocked.
Yeah. Do you care about anybody? I think that's love. So there's feelings are one thing, but loving kindness to me, it has multiple aspects. One of them is a feeling, but I think more important is care. That to me is the expression of love, is caring for ourselves and caring for others. But yeah, it's this is definitely part of that formula, that seeing that that these feelings aren't sort of easy for us to get to. And but what happens with that thought, right? Typically, when you have that thought, you feel worse. When you have the thought, "Oh, I can't love anybody,"
That's
right? It's like, but again, in my view, if you care for people, then you love them. It's just that there's a feeling level that needs to be cultivated. That can certainly be cultivated. And a lot of it is, it's not so much I'm going to make loving kindness come as it is kind of, as you're suggesting, letting go of the things that are in the way of it, that blockage that we feel. And a lot, so, kind of the core practice of Buddhism and Buddhist meditation is letting go. Now, there is an aspect that's cultivating, that's trying to arouse things, but that can be so easily become fraught, like doing loving kindness practice. I'm supposed to feel love, and may I be happy. I don't feel happy. May you be happy. I don't feel happy toward them. I don't love. So if we think rather about letting go of anger or letting go of whatever, blockages there are, then another kind of Buddhist principle is that when you strip away the five hindrances, or when you strip away hatred, what's underneath is love. We don't have to import it. It's already there. It's just that because of causes and conditions of our life, we can't access it. It's hard to get to. So the main thing is just to keep letting go, and then trust that what'll happen is that you'll get in touch with that.
Hey, that you're missing it, Kevin Griffin.
I'm catching out of the corner of my eye, We don't have a lot of thunder and lightning in the Bay Area, We have earthquakes, fires, mudslides. But this stuff, this is pretty awesome. Beautiful.
Thank you. I like what you said about underneath your want for people to do better, just love.
Yeah.
When I took from it, we had a guy in a class, like healthier once. It's like, I got, there's these people at work that drive me absolutely nuts. Kept kind of elaborating, well, they do things differently than I would. Very Buddhist, he's trying, very good. And, it got mentioned that because they're doing something different than him, because he wants them to do different, he wants them to do better, what he thinks is better. Right.
Right.
So there's love in it.
Right.
It's the weirdest thing.
Yeah.
So,
Right. Which is like changing perspective. Like, how are you looking at this? Yeah, it's good. So, do you mind if I just step out into a weather question? I'm just wondering if there's people who have lived here for a long time, and if the storms have always been like this, or do you sense that the climate has changed at all during your lifetime? Yeah.
Like this, but we have some of these events more frequent.
Yeah, and maybe more intensely or something. Yeah. I just wanted to make sure there wasn't any, that I wasn't misinterpreting.
Saying this is like a once in a century.
Right. That happens every year. Yeah. Boy, those centuries are going by fast. Man. Yeah. Yeah.
They wanted to show off.
Oh, you wanted to show up. Yeah. Well,
So we're.
right, there aren't any trees because they were all wiped out in the last storm. Yeah.
Curious.
You didn't see the camera.
We're under a thunderstorm warning, but there's no tornado warning at this time.
Oh, really? There might be a thunderstorm?
Ends in 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, good luck with that.
The series is
I mean, it really is like remarkable. I was saying to Roger yesterday, I'll remember your name.
Should check a video.
Like that there are probably very few human beings in the history of humanity who have gotten to experience the climate changing during their own lifetimes. Ordinarily, it's quite slow, these things happen. I mean, I don't know, the ice ages, I don't know. I think they generally came on slowly, not like, hey, yeah, when I was a kid, and now it's pretty freaky, but delusion. Anyway,
Okay, you reached a tipping point. But,
yeah,
was, as we acknowledge what the feelings are, the unpleasantness. And those around us who ask us what's going on.
and there's what?
And those around us who ask us, what's going on? I can see something's wrong. And you label them, like you say, oh, I'm anxious, like right now.
Yeah,
But or you say I'm depressed, and then that seed gives the other person that's already they continue the story.
Yep.
And what you're going through and have them not create the story or connect with the story, because that's part of their life too.
was there a question?
Yeah, how do you convey to your loved ones or your spouse what you're going through without having them then perpetuate the story, because they don't necessarily mean to. But if you say, yeah, I'm feeling kind of down today, and then in their head they're thinking, oh, last time she was down, this happened, this happened,
Yeah.
this happened. Then there's a story that they're then initiating in order to help you. Or, and I say help freely, but help you
Yeah.
to get through it, because they don't want you to feel that way.
Well, I think if you, I mean, what comes to mind, I don't have really an answer, but what comes to mind is to be very, very clear and specific, like to say, I'm having these difficult feelings, but I'm okay with it, just to let you know, and that, and then, you have to prove it, right? More than anything, we have to, when you say, oh, I'm going to stop drinking, people are like, okay. Yeah. Let's see how that works. And so it's really about, I mean, I've gone through this with my wife because I've been with her. I mean, we first, got together in the early 90s, and so she sees that I manage my emotions better than I did back then. And so it sometimes lets me know, like she appreciates, oh, I know that was really hard and really appreciate how you were with that. But that took a long time to show that, right? I had to change, and then she had to change what her belief was about me. And it's really more about proving it, I think, than it is about anything you can say. I think maybe we should take a little break. We've been sitting here for over an hour now, and so we'll take a break and then come back and actually meditate with the weather. And the recording is in progress. So I want to do a period of meditation, and I'll talk. Firstly, when I try to listen to a guided meditation, I usually can't hear it very well. I kind of tend to go into my own mind. So, maybe you'll be able to follow along, maybe not. And, part of what I try to do is kind of take people through a process uh, to kind of connect with what I was talking about, connecting ultimately with kind of this energetic state and beyond, actually. But more important than like following what I'm saying exactly, um, I want to sit long enough so that uh, your own efforts to control what's happening eventually stop working, so that you're forced in a way to surrender to what's happening, because there's such a tendency to try to control our, I mean, generally to control everything in our lives, our minds, our bodies, our everybody around us, but particularly in meditation, to control the meditative experience. And it mindfulness is not about control. Mindfulness is about examination, investigating, bringing curiosity to what is happening. And again, we have such a tendency to think if it's unpleasant, there's something wrong. It shouldn't be this way. I want to stop it. I want to change it. I want to fix it. That we neglect to actually turn toward the difficult experiences and be with them and breathe and learn that it's okay to feel whatever is happening. And maybe something really pleasant arises. Sometimes it's not unpleasant. I mean, I tend to focus. I have a, negative inclination of mind. So I tend to like talk about and think about all the bad things. But oftentimes people have very pleasant experiences in meditation. And in the same way that we can kind of block ourselves from feeling the difficult, we can also block ourselves from feeling the pleasant. So just to, really try to keep turning toward what you're experiencing. And particularly if you haven't done a lot of meditation practice, in the beginning, you probably won't be able to figure out what you're feeling. So don't turn this into another, like, how do you do this? I'm doing this wrong. What do I need to, just like, do what you can do. Be present for what you can be. Like, the question you can just ask yourself is, what am I aware of right now? Or what am I experiencing right now? It's not, you're not looking for an answer to that question, not like a verbal answer, but just like, you know, and so just do your best. And we'll check in on the other side. All right. So starting by aligning your body as best you can, so that, and actually the way we hold our bodies is quite influential in this process. We know how slumping affects our mood, or being rigid affects our mood. And so, and it then affects our thinking and our mind state. So just to try to be in a very neutral posture where the body's relatively open and aligned. And you can close your eyes or just lower your gaze. You don't have to shut out all the light. Sometimes it's helpful to let some light in. Just feeling your body and whatever that means for you. What do you feel? And I just mean the sensations in your body. Like I can feel my butt on the chair. I feel top of my head feels cool. Feel the movement of the breath, how my torso moves as I breathe. Whatever sensations are prominent or stand out. Having a sense of releasing, softening the body, relaxing, even as you maintain a nice balanced posture. The sounds of the weather may catch your attention, and that's you can be mindful of that, of the sounds. Mindful of other sounds. We're just starting then by having a general sense of our perceptions. These are the external perceptions. So to give ourselves a particular landing point, we use the breath as our focus. Can either feel the breath at the nostrils, the touch of air coming in, the air going out, or you can feel the breath in the belly and the diaphragm, the expansion and contraction of each breath. So that's your main focal point. But again, if a sensation or a sound arises that calls to you, that tries to get your attention, it's fine to turn toward that for a moment, to listen or to feel, before gently coming back to the breath. It can strengthen our focus to use a simple noting with the breath. Just silently saying to yourself, in, out. You're following the breath at the nostrils, or rising, falling. You're following the breath at the belly. Just a way of making more explicit the focus you are intending. Supports the development of concentration. very natural for the mind to wander, to drift into thinking, lose touch with the breath and the body. So our first element of practice is just learning to return. When we remember that we're trying to pay attention to the breath, when we realize that we're thinking instead of being mindful, we gently come back to the sensations of breathing. This is a critical moment in practice. It's easy in that moment to become frustrated or judgmental, feel that you're failing or doing it wrong. And those are all unnecessary additional judgments. So to return to the breath gently is to just do that, to come back without adding commentary, to let go of the commentary, and connect again with the pure sensation of breath. It's quite a beautiful thing, the breath, this life-giving process. As we sit, connect with the breath, keep returning to the breath when the mind wanders. Allow the body to continue to soften. As we exhale, there's a sense of release, calming. The attention becomes more finely attuned to the sensations, the touch of air, feelings of breathing, and the more general feelings of the body, becoming more settled, more serene. Not that thoughts stop. We become less interested in the stories and the content, start to see thoughts just as movements of mind, of images or thoughts, words passing through the mind, not holding some truth or vital information. It's almost like mental energy. Instead, we keep turning toward the body, the breath, becoming more subtly attuned to these nonverbal experiences, to these felt experiences. As the body becomes more calm, the attention becomes more subtle and attuned. You may become aware of the underlying energetic states, the pre-verbal feelings. So one moment when it can be particularly helpful to look at this as the moment when you realize that you're thinking. And just as you return to the breath, to inquire within, to feel in the chest and the belly what that thinking has aroused, what feelings have been aroused by thought. Start to see that our moods, emotional states are directly tied to the thinking world. We let go of the thoughts, let go of naming feelings, and just try to attune to their quality. What is the quality of the feeling as you breathe? You might feel resistance or anxiety, you might feel numbness or fogginess. first, this is be confusing. We just keep asking this simple question. What am I feeling right now? Not looking for a verbal answer, just trying to feel the breath and then feel anything else that's present. Not turning this into a project, trying to do it right, trying to get it. Just having this openness and curiosity. Sitting here in this room with this group of people, with thunder and rain, with the hum of the refrigerator, with sensations in your body, the thoughts that are passing through. What is this moment like? How am I relating to it? Am I trying to control my experience, my mind, my body, my feelings? Am I truly aware? Or am I caught up in analyzing or figuring out, solving? Just letting go of that approach to experience. Don't have to figure anything out. So the longer we sit, the more we experience these physical challenges, mental challenges, emotional. One framework of those challenges is the hindrance of desire, of aversion, capture the thoughts and the mental processes. We can become sleepy as we become relaxed to the point of drowsiness. Can you be mindful of that? Or its counterpart, restlessness. Body wants to move. But we just sit with the experience, explore it, hold it with kindness, with patience, with compassion. The last hindrance, doubt, questioning our own ability to practice, questioning whether this is a helpful approach, whether it's valid. An escape route. Our practice is to see these things, not take them personally. Just be aware of them. Aware of the thoughts of desire and aversion, aware of the feelings of sleepiness or restlessness, aware of the questions or doubts, resistance. And always to return to the just this breath, just this body, this present moment. Nowhere to go, nothing to do. Just to be awake and aware. do something a little different. Just want you to just work with us, just sit with someone else and share with them about your experience meditating. And you can, if you want to take a simple question, what's the most challenging aspect of meditation for you? And if you want to add something positive, you can say, what's the most pleasant part? So just find someone to share with, and we'll spend about 10 minutes with this. Make sure that each person gets a chance to speak and listen with mindfulness. Listen. Let me talk a little bit about more about mindful listening. So, in intensive retreats and in residential retreats, I'll do this where only one person speaks at a time, just to keep it more contained. But I think we can do this a little more informally. But the idea is that as you're listening, you're not planning what you're going to respond, how you're going to respond, and as you're speaking, you're not like trying to get a response or something. That you're just speaking what's authentic for you, and as you're listening, you're just trying to listen with openness and curiosity, just letting in what's being said and noticing what comes up for you, and trying to let go of any projection or thought about it. So just sharing about the challenges, what are challenging, and you can particularly reference this period of meditation or more generally your general experience. Okay. So let's start that. Everybody's kind of bunched up here, so you might want to turn your chairs or maybe move away so that you can and see if we have an even number of people or not. So if there's, why don't you just bring this guy in with you? Unless
You said something you don't know.
no, it's okay.
About challenge, and that is great. But again, really, there's that. I tend to not. What happened? So yeah. Related even in group, I really need to discuss yeah, so that's but I've been doing this on and off. And it was, it took me a while for like, I started meditating. I didn't have my If I get it. I feel like it's another like. Probably fine. Right. Yeah, no, yeah, she's. It's good. It's
Is that enough time? So love to hear anything you want to share. Obviously, not to share what your partner said. Maintain that confidentiality unless they give you permission. But anything anybody would like to share, anything that came out of that for you that you feel like you discovered or learned? Yes.
As those sensations that are so unpleasant come over me, I'm starting to see how my brain wants to override them.
Uh-huh.
And it's interesting because they're so unpleasant, and then I'm judging myself for wanting to override them.
Right.
With something more pleasant, but I think it was what you talked about earlier, and then taking a step back and trying not to judge myself for wanting to do that.
Yeah.
And just sitting with it, even if it's just 2 seconds.
Yeah.
And recognizing it, oh, this is really unpleasant, and then overriding it, but again, trying not to judge the overriding, it's just a pattern.
This is the real, to me, this is the real value of being able to let go of thoughts. It's not like I get into some empty space, but just being able to let go of thought for a moment so that you can shift how you're experiencing something and see oh, what am I really experiencing here? Let me step out of the story for a moment. So when were the unpleasant sensations were happening for you?
So when the storm came through earlier, it triggered anxiety, and anxiety then led to a storyline.
Okay.
Meditation,
Yeah.
the storyline led to some severe anxiety, which caused very unpleasant, really unpleasant feelings and anxiety are
So
combined.
Tell me about the unpleasant feelings.
It's this emptiness in my stomach. It feels like I've been puke.
Oh, yeah, okay,
My stomach falls out and.
yeah, yeah. So this is where I think it becomes particularly interesting because we see that, so let me step back a little bit and frame this in the four foundations of mindfulness. This is how the Buddha suggested we practice meditation, that we be aware of our body. And then, so the first is the body. The second one is just called feeling, which in Pali, the language of the early Buddhist scriptures, is Vedana, which just means pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. So it's not really a way of relating to feelings that we talk about. It's not really talking about emotions. Anyway, so there's body, sensations, and what goes on in the body. There's feeling, this Vedana, and then there's mind states. And then the last one is called phenomena. It's sort of a different category. But I want to particularly look at these first three and the connections. We see that there, even though the Buddha tries to divide these things up, that they aren't really separate, right? They're intertwined. And so it becomes very tricky, like, an emotion that makes you feel like throwing up. And you realize, oh, like, okay, so that's an emotion, but it's coming out physically. And I mean, this isn't, rocket science, like, oh yeah, mind-body connection, right? But on the subtler level, this is where it becomes tricky when it's not something as distinct as like feeling nauseous, but rather it's just this sort of like, what am I feeling? And there isn't sort of something obvious, and yet, so it's like in the body, but it's not. It's sort of like it exists in this sort of space that's hard to even define, and sometimes people talk about it as the emotional body, and that there's some like way that we experience feeling, however we characterize that, because the other problem with the word feeling is that in English that refers to both sensations and emotions. and the Buddha's not talking about either of those, it's something else. So we start to, as we get into this, we see that it's kind of mysterious what goes on in our experience. We categorize it. We use language to like put things into categories, but when you really get down to what's going on, the human experience is much more complex and subtle and nebulous than that, than really distinct thoughts and feelings. It's like, and this area that I've been talking about this morning is that place where it becomes very tricky to really parse out what's going on. And yet so much of our life and so much of our behavior is in response to this area of what's really a nonverbal experience that we turn into. We give it meaning. It turns into like the energy behind addiction and so much of our behavior that, and yet we can go through our life without ever really knowing or examining or exploring this world of this felt, and I just call it the felt experience. And I was trying to write a book about it last year, and I got 80 pages into it, and then I was like, I don't know what else to say, because it's like not verbal. It's really hard to talk about. And yet I think it's so important to examine. Anyway, other comments? Yeah, Ben.
And I think that, like you're saying, as if it wasn't already difficult enough to figure out how you feel, what words could describe that. You also have to then factor in those words according to other people.
Uh-huh.
And so like, how will you be perceived when you say, I feel sick, or I feel like there's a whole nother half to the game now, because then you have to realize you have to navigate this communication with this other person who you want to understand you or who wants to understand you, but it's like very nuanced.
which came up before, the idea of like, well, people are going to judge you or they're going to take a certain attitude. Oh, and if your partner is like, quote, codependent, then it's like you don't want to tell them you're feeling bad because then they're going to jump in and try to fix you. And you're like, oh God, like, I'm okay. Leave me alone,
Or become contagious and they don't feel it in that.
Well, right. Yeah. You made me feel this way. Yeah, John.
Yeah, I was asked, how'd my meditation go? And I said, it went great.
Uh-huh.
I'm not trying to learn not to think. I'm trying to more easily recognize when I start to think or drift off. And I did that lots of times.
Yeah.
But to me, meditation is a laboratory.
Yeah.
One of the laboratory, so that we can look at the 2 or 3 things of the process that we're interested in and not be distracted by all the other things going on.
Mm-hmm.
So the purpose of meditation is to recognize that I am not my thoughts, that my thoughts and my habits and my triggers play themselves. It's not that I'm trying to learn to understand and figure all that out.
No.
It's that I'm trying to remind myself that when I'm not sitting meditating in the laboratory, when I'm sitting at home watching TV and some politician comes in and says something, and I start having all these reactions, that the same thing is going on in real life, day in and day out, minute in and minute out.
Yeah.
That's sitting on the chair. I'm just trying to learn to, oh God, I'm caught in the whirlwind of this series of thoughts. I need to get out of that.
Yeah.
That's part of the 12-step part is if I recognize when I'm driving by the liquor store and I see a sign with Maker's Mark on sale, my car starts to drive itself.
Yeah.
I say, oh no, that's old trick number 24. I can recognize that.
Yeah.
If I can recognize I'm trapped in the thought, I can step out of it. If I don't recognize I'm trapped in the thought, then I'm trapped in the thought. And my car drives itself into Collie West and I feel the maker.
Yeah. It's so interesting, right? So one of my teachers, Wes Nisker, was kind of a sit-down comic. Like he was a Buddhist satirist, as well as just being a great teacher. And he had some lines that really stuck with me. One of which is, "Your mind has a mind of its own." It's like, that's weird. That's so true. Like, my mind has a mind, but I thought it was my mind. No, it's got its own agenda, and like it sees that sign and it's like, I'm going over there, and you're like, wait. But the remarkable thing is that we're able to see that, right? This is one of the things that makes humans distinct from other beings on this planet, as far as we know, that we're able to like know that we're having a thought, and that's the thing that mindfulness depends upon, and what we're trying to cultivate, that aspect of knowing, knowing that we're thinking, or knowing that we're knowing. That's quite a trick, of consciousness. Excuse me. Yes.
A minute ago, you were talking about 4 ways the Buddha would speak about something, and
Four foundations of mindfulness, they're called.
Can you just say those again? Because you use a word starting with a V that I remember.
Yeah, Vedana. So it's in English: body, feelings, mind states or mind, and phenomena, which is just a. So the feelings in Pali, the language of the early scriptures, is Vedana, Vedana. And it only refers to the pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral quality of every sense experience, including every mental sense experience. The mind is considered the 6th sense. Yeah.
I think I'm really tired. For us, I'm brilliant because I just mind is completely blank. Then all of a sudden, it was as if something has a voice that wasn't me said, we're all still here. And I was really aware in my body of this incredible relief that I wasn't aware of. I mean, I didn't have it where I said those words. But it was kind of cool because I wasn't thinking about doing it.
Mm.
It just sort of happened. So maybe I should just not get much sleep.
You know, that they don't sleep very much in monasteries, as far as I can tell. You know, there's a risk involved, but I mean, in terms of, at least in terms of just falling asleep when you try to meditate, but yeah, I mean, there is something about when you cut down on sleep, you cut down that ability to suppress becomes weaker, you know, and it's not really my favorite thing to not get enough sleep. But it can be interesting, yeah. Although, as you're suggesting, it can also sort of maybe create delusional states as well. I mean, sort of the dreamlike stuff comes through. Yeah, certainly when you're meditating and you sort of drift into that nether space, you're not falling asleep, but you're not really awake. That's where people will often say like, wow, I was having these amazing images and like bizarre stuff was just showing. I'm like, yeah, you're falling asleep because it's sort of alluring. It's like like dreams are kind of starting to come through, but it's like waking dreams. I think there are some teachers that, you know, try to teach that. Not me.
Clarification on that, so if you're having these nether states that you're semi-aware of, I guess you just notice them like you notice everything else and let it go.
Well, if you feel that there's like a lethargy, a sluggishness, kind of dullness coming into the mind, it can be helpful to maybe counteract it a little bit. You know, if you can be mindful of the experience, it can be quite interesting. But you know, actually falling asleep or just getting into that completely dull state of mind isn't really generally very productive, and it can be very difficult to be mindful because falling asleep is sort of the antithesis of mindfulness. So typically we would say, you know, open the eyes and sit up a little bit straighter for a few minutes and kind of try to revive yourself. But as I say, it can be interesting to see what happens in those states because, you know, again, to get back to like emotional states, like we associate, you know, depression is a depressed state, which it brings on a lot of lethargy. And, you know, I talked in high school, it was like I just want to get home from school and just lie down on the couch. It's like, so there's this risk that those physical states, you know, turn into emotions, or the emotional states turn into physical states. And the same with anxiety, right? There's a lot of, that's an restlessness and you get churned up and stirred up. And, you know, there is something about trying to have, I mean, in meditation as well as probably in daily life, to maintaining some and cultivating some kind of balanced energy, right? That's alert. I mean, what we describe in meditation is to be alert and relaxed. So you're alert, but you're not anxious. You're relaxed, but you're not sleepy. And that's, it's very tricky. It's actually difficult to get to that balanced state. You know, typically I'll start out my meditation and I'll be kind of like, okay, I need to settle, I need to settle, I need to settle. And then next thing I know, I fall off the cliff and I'm like, oh, went too far. And so it's just another one of the challenges. It's why those two things are part of the five hindrances: sleepiness or sloth and torpor, and restlessness and worry. Those are just sleepiness and restlessness are two of the prime challenges for meditation. So it's another reason why I try to approach meditation with this very compassionate, self-compassionate, and forgiving attitude. Like, I'm not meditating with some striving, like I need to get this right, you know. I meditate with the attitude of, oh, this is difficult, and there are many different, you know, pitfalls along the way. And so when I find myself falling into some of those pits, that I'm like, I just go, oh, well, here I am in this pit. Okay, let me see if I can step out of that. It's okay, you know, it's part of meditation. It's not your fault, you know. Another thing that my dear friend, late friend, Wes, who said, your mind is a mind of its own. He also had a saying, he said, you are not your fault.
That's.
It's comforting, isn't it? You are not your fault. You didn't create yourself. No. You're involved in the creation of yourself, you know, but you didn't originate yourself. All the causes and conditions, you didn't create the English language. You didn't create this body, the way the brain works, you know, all that stuff, you know, you are not your fault, you know, so don't beat yourself up for being a flawed human being, because flawed human being is redundant. You know, human beings are by nature flawed. Where beings are flawed, right? So let's not make it worse than it already is. Not that I'm suggesting that things are bad, but yes.
So speaking about not being my fault, there are also a lot of there's a lot of cultural energy. And so a pattern that I've gotten into that is not helpful is kind of a focus of why I'm here this weekend, to think about how to work with that, because I would like to be free of it. And so it's so automatic, and I just keep doing it. Can you relate?
Can you?
It's not good for me, and I keep doing it.
Can you be more specific about what it is?
Yeah.
Thank you.
A screen.
Yeah.
Substance du jour, YouTube.
Yeah.
Email. I've mostly gotten off social media, but still I find myself. And so today I've come up with some ideas, some stories about maybe why that is. The first thing earlier today was when you talk about meditation being healing, I then asked myself the question, what needs to be healed? And then I asked myself, what's hurting? And then I thought, well, if I get to a story about that, then I'll have a story about that, which can be useful. But maybe the thing is what you already said about what if I was just present to whatever energy is there.
Yeah.
When I want to do that.
Yeah. Thing. Yeah. And then in that moment, ask, is there something else I could do right now that would be more helpful for me?
There's 100 million things I can do that would be more helpful than that. Most of the time. Sometimes it is useful.
Yeah.
But I was on Zoom last night and somebody said something about dopamine, and I was like, well, that's, if we want to talk, is that you? No, yeah, no. I was curious if it was this one. It's like, I'm going for the dopamine, I think, on a physical
sure.
way, I'm going for the dopamine, but there's an emotional piece to it. And the story that I arrived at in a moment this morning was like, do I exist if I'm not doing something?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think for me, the kind of more existential question is, do I exist if I'm not thinking? That's one of the reasons I think it's hard for us to stop thinking, because we relate existence so much to like,
I think therefore.
yes, precisely. Yeah. Just, not Descartes was not a Buddhist. We'll just say that. But he presents a perfect contrast to Buddhism. No, I think it's beautiful what you're talking about. We have to start by seeing what's going on, seeing how we're creating suffering, and then try to make other choices. And, it's progress, not perfection. It's not, oh, I'm going to just get rid of all devices. I'm going to live. I'm like, no, I mean, these are useful things. It's helpful. Like we wouldn't know that the tornado was coming if we didn't have our phone, but yeah, it's like, who's the master here? The screen or me, and so yeah, to have alternative activities that we turn to that are more wholesome, get us away from things. I found, 15 years ago, I took a class with one of my teachers called Awakening Joy. This is James Barrows. She's a Bay Area teacher and somebody I'd worked with for many years. And that was a really helpful thing to look at for me as a person who tends toward the non-joy, let's say. And I stumbled on the idea that I wanted to play golf, which is something I did when I was a kid. But once I became a, a musician and a hippie and poor and all, and a rebel, that was like, that's what those people do that I don't associate with, But like I had this pull, so I started playing golf, and what I've noticed is that when I go to play golf, it's even more than when I meditate. I'm just there. I'm not thinking about anything else. I'm not thinking about politics. I'm not thinking about. I do try to bring the Dharma into my practice, but I'm not thinking about teaching or there's no. I'm just there doing this thing that I kind of love and hate, and anybody who's played golf understands that relationship. I mean, it's very absorbing, and it just like I had a knee replacement last fall, and I haven't really been able to get back to that. And then like I really am aware of like I don't have like a space where I just go and like do something that's just like doesn't involve a screen and isn't about accomplishing anything. And so that's been difficult for me. Actually, my replacement has been writing addictively. Okay, I'm going to write 2,000 words. But yeah, I mean, finding wholesome activities, playful activities, I think is so valuable. And again, for addicts, it's like we often lost that during our active addiction. Anything beyond just getting loaded and chasing that. And finding a way back, I think of it as like returning to innocence. Because for me, like playing golf was returning to a childhood activity. And so, finding things. Well, what did I do before I depended upon drugs and alcohol to make me happy? So it's a challenge. Roger, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I was noticing that during this meditation that I never, a lot of the sensations or thoughts or everything was part of a strategy.
Mm-hmm.
for not having energy states. We're not, we're trying to keep those energy states from being manifest. And I never had seen that before. You know, like, I've always like pain in my shoulder or in my head was something other, and I had to learn to adjust to that, or I, you know, or being tired or sloth. I thought that was something that was keeping me from, you know, and I'm beginning to see that as a strategy that I'm very intelligently using to keep me from feeling.
Yeah. There is some very strong tendency to avoid letting feelings in for a lot of people, and that because there's this underlying fear of being swamped, you know, being just carried away and drowned, just, you know, flooded with you know, some losing control, in other words. And you know, control, I mean, it's another one of those things that we strive for in this world in which we're not in control. And you know, it's fine. We have to make an effort to control certain things, you know, otherwise we, you know, wet our pants all the time. I don't know where that came from. Yeah. I'm just, you know, getting very Freudian here, I guess. No, but you know, of course, we need to, like, you know, behave in public. We need to, you know, show up for work and do all these practical things that involve control, right? Like making an effort to not just like be out of control. But then as you say, it becomes this strategy that's counterproductive because at some point it can cut us off from being fully alive and fully awake. And if we're pursuing some kind of spiritual awakening, you know, this is something that blocks that awakening. Well, it's a biggie.
How do you define awakening?
How do I define awakening?
Yeah.
How do you define awakening? The teacher trick I learned from Jack Cornfield.
I really don't have a pure answer.
I wasn't asking for a prepared answer. What comes up for you?
Maybe freedom from the negative behaviors that prevent you from being fully present.
That's beautiful. I love that. Yeah. I mean, if you consider behavior to include mental behavior, right? Like there are three forms of action. There's physical action, verbal action, and mental action. Those are the three forms of karma, three ways that we create our reality or our life. You know, I mean, the thing is, like, in the Buddhist world, there's many different definitions of awakening. And Jack Cornfield actually has a great essay. It's called, I think it's just called Enlightenments, plural. And he talks about the different Buddhist traditions, and he uses, you know, different people as, like, the Dalai Lama represents the compassionate enlightenment, and Thich Nhat Hanh represents the mindfulness enlightenment, and you know, like maybe there's a Burmese teacher like Mahasi Sayadaw represents like the insight, enlightenment, and so, or awakening, so there is this idea that in this Buddhist concept of enlightenment, that there are different sort of doorways that you go through. And this is, and now I'm going into like Dharma teacher mode, but why not? There are three classical doorways to enlightenment through the three characteristics. I think I know I mentioned them last night. Three characteristics in Pali are anicca, dukkha, anatta. Anicca is impermanence. Dukkha is suffering or unsatisfactoriness. Anatta is not self. So in this model, each of us maybe has an inclination to awaken through one of these, through insight into one of these three characteristics. So you might, like, there are many examples in the suttas of the Buddha just saying to people, everything is impermanent, and saying that in various ways, but whatever is of the nature to arise is of the nature to pass away. And that people become enlightened when they just hear that because it's like, oh, I thought reality was this solid thing that I could hold on to. Now I realize I can't. And so I'm letting go. That's how I understand how somebody just becomes enlightened. I mean, this is the ancient teachings. I mean, that's, maybe it didn't happen exactly that way. So that's one way to become enlightened, by realizing everything is impermanent and just letting go. Or you realize the Four Noble Truths, which is that clinging to anything, grasping after anything, can't bring satisfaction. So this is dukkha, that things are just inherently unsatisfying. I have lunch and I think, okay, I'm full now. And then 3 hours later, I'm hungry again. So there's no meal that resolves hunger, right? There's no sleep that resolves fatigue. There's no sexual activity that resolves sexual desire. There's just continuous, like, experience that can't satisfy you. I mean, you can see that's related to impermanence, right? And then the third, so sometimes people like realize this, like, oh, all my striving, all my desires are pointless. They're not leading me anything, where I'm just going to let go, and they become enlightened. And then the third one is seeing that self is a creation. So this is more subtle. It's like, oh, all my thoughts and feelings and stories, they're just things that appear and disappear. They're impermanent, right? I'm going to go through this. I have the sutta about this. We'll go through tomorrow. But, you just see that this idea about who you are and what yourself is a construction. And again, you just kind of let go, and there's this freedom, right? Oh, like because of, self is this thing I have to protect and guard and build up and construct. And when I let it go, it's like, oh, like that. It's just like addiction, right? I thought I needed to drink and use all the time. When I stopped, it's like, what a relief. So all three of these pathways or doorways are really doorways to letting go in one way or another, to helping you to see that clinging isn't, resolving the problem of existence for you. So, I mean, that's the type of thing, there's other, even more like, elaborate descriptions and explanations around this. But you know, what I'm more interested in is just keeping it simple and just realizing like, oh, like just if I just keep letting go as this guiding principle, since that's the doorway that each of these kind of works, that that's going to be what's freeing for me, um and that one of the ideas that I think is also I find very helpful is that there isn't some like state I'm going to arrive at that I can't arrive at, that then I'm spiritually awakened and like it's permanent. Because right away you realize, oh, wait, everything's impermanent. How can I get to some state? There isn't some state to get to. It's only something that arises in a moment. We have moments of awakening. We've all had moments of awakening. Getting sober is a spiritual awakening, right? The first step to me is already the 12th step in that sense, and that's one of the ways that I go through the 12 steps, how each step has a spiritual awakening in it. I think for me, that's more useful, is to think of this as an ongoing process that's, there are moments of awakening. And yeah, as I understand it, and I do believe that it's possible to get to a place where you're not triggered anymore, that you don't fall into craving anymore. But it's not a state, you still might have unpleasant experiences. Yeah, John.
You kind of got there, but I was kind of thinking, well, what are within the 12 steps, what are the kind of parallel ideas?
Yeah.
The processes of enlightenment or awakening within the steps.
Yeah.
Or beginning to realize the way the world really works, the way your life is, really was.
Yeah.
Recognize reality. How would you describe enlightenment in terms of steps?
Well, in one of my books, I go through this. I don't remember which one, but I think I know I have it somewhere. But so a couple. I'll show a couple of ways I try to sort of characterize this. So, like the first step is awakening to our addiction, or to our powerlessness, to our need to change, or the second step is awakening to the possibility of freedom. The third step is awakening to letting go, I guess. The fourth step is awakening to my inventory, like the truth of my failings. The eighth step is awakening to all the people I harmed in a very specific way. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of in there. In each of them, there's a waking up that happens with each of those steps. Yeah.
Sounds like it's coming from your 12-step workbook.
It very likely could be. Yeah. So it's after 1 now, so I think maybe we'll take a lunch break until about 2. And then we'll see what happens this afternoon. Try not to get, swept away in the flood in the interim. Maybe just let's start the afternoon with a period of loving kindness meditation. And, I won't push it quite so long as the first one this morning, but I'll take you through the traditional version of this and then maybe talk about some of the other ways to approach this. We have people lingering out in the lobby by any chance, John?
No,
thank you.
Just in the restrooms.
What?
Just restrooms.
Oh, in the restroom. Well, get them out. All right. I thought I heard voices. Then again, that could just be me.
No.
Somebody was talking to themselves. All right. So again, just settling into a comfortable posture, especially with loving kindness meditation. We don't want to create extra tension in the body. And closing the eyes or just lowering your gaze. Feeling the breath, and particularly in the center of the chest and the heart center. And having a sense of softening, opening. Non-resistance. And we begin by bringing to mind someone who is easy to love, easy for us to love. Could be a dear person, could even be a pet. Could be someone who supported and took care of us, or it could be a child we've taken care of. And whoever it is, we want the feeling of loving kindness toward them to be quite simple, not messy or complicated, very easy to love. And just breathing so that you're staying in the body as you bring this person to mind. We want loving kindness meditation to contain the body, to not be separate, not just be a mental exercise. And as you think of this dear one, starting to repeat silently some words of loving kindness. You can use your own, especially if you have your own regular practice, or use the ones I suggest. May you be happy. May you be peaceful. May you be safe from inner and outer harm. May you be happy. May you be peaceful. May you be safe. You can let those words continue just with the breath, just flowing with the loving kindness phrases as you hold the image or sense of this beloved one in your mind. the mind wanders, just gently bringing it back, keeping the practice simple, not digressing. May you be happy, peaceful, safe. A pleasant feeling may arise, a feeling of love, or not. There's no requirement, no right thing to happen. Expressing our care, our wish. May arouse feelings, or this may stay more as a contemplative practice with the breath. Turning the attention and these wishes back on yourself. May I be happy. May I be peaceful. May I be safe from inner and outer harm. May I be happy. May I be peaceful. May I be safe. Noticing any resistance, judgment, and letting that go, simply following the practice. No story, no comparing. Just phrases of loving kindness with the breath, with the thought of yourself sitting here. Now, beginning to think of other dear ones, family or friends, people who you care for. And let the images or just the thought of them, perhaps their name or feeling, just come through one after the other, and letting the phrases of loving kindness continue in the mind. May you be happy. May you be peaceful. May you be safe. One by one, bringing dear ones to mind, continuing the phrases. If there's a pull, the mind to get into thinking, just letting that go, staying with this simple process. Now if we can think of a neutral person, this is someone we don't have strong feelings for or against. Who might be someone who works in a shop or a cafe you frequent, be a neighbor that you wave to but that you don't really know. In fact, most people are neutral to us. So just bringing anyone you can think of to mind who fits this. Doesn't have to be the perfect person, perfectly neutral. And just continuing the phrases of loving kindness. May you be happy. May you be peaceful. May you be safe. Now we work for a time with the difficult person. It can be someone we know or a public figure that we have difficult feelings for. You don't have to take on the most difficult, but just someone we have some aversion to. And see if we can just open our heart for a few moments. May you be happy. May you be peaceful. May you be safe. Continuing to stay connected with the body through the breath. Image of this difficult person and letting the phrases continue to repeat in the mind. Now beginning to radiate loving kindness. Sense of sending loving kindness from the heart outward into the world, beginning with this room, this space. May all those in this room and in this building be happy. May you be peaceful. May you be safe. Make a sense of expansiveness. Seeing that the mind goes beyond the body. Our wishes can project outward into the world. May you be happy. May you be peaceful. May you be safe. Radiating kindness outward from this building out into this neighborhood, touching all the beings, humans, animals, birds, insects. Loving kindness radiating out throughout this city, across the land, protecting all beings from danger. May all those nearby be happy, peaceful, safe. Loving kindness continuing to expand and radiate out across the plains and the rivers, to the mountains and the oceans, covering this continent, out into the sea. Loving kindness radiating around the entire world. touching all those who are suffering in any way, mentally, physically, emotionally. May all beings on earth be happy, peaceful, and safe. May they be free from sickness, from oppression, from war. May all beings on earth find spiritual sustenance, meaning, and they find love. Holding the entire planet in your heart, the vast, limitless heart. Radiating out now from the earth into space in all directions, filling the universe with loving kindness, sense of limitless loving kindness that radiates from your heart. May all beings everywhere be happy. May all beings everywhere be peaceful. May all beings everywhere be free from suffering. Open, expansive, limitless loving kindness. Now coming back into this room, into this body, into this heart, into this breath. Seeing that this boundless, limitless loving kindness lives in your own heart, is always there, waiting to be awakened, waiting to be shared. Oh, you know, talk a little bit about how I view this, partly the purpose of this practice, and you know, I mean, obviously there are some challenges to it, but what I think we're first starting to do is just kind of tap into our humanity, you know, to remind ourselves of some essential connection we have with the world. So easy to become alienated from others, to, you know, find ourselves in a kind of us versus them. And of course there are lots of ways that that's real, and that, you know, is not something to ignore. But with this practice, it's also to step out of that and to see our shared humanity and what the shared challenges of being a human being, just to have that connection. You know, I think when we practice meditation and look at our own experience, we can't help but realize and get in touch with the inherent challenge of being a human being, of that these qualities, you know, that classically called greed, hatred, and delusion, you know, that these, or just the way that suffering arises. See that even if, you know, we don't have any problems necessarily in our life, that just this inner struggle for balance, for peace, is something we live with. And, you know, and so that first stage of practice is seeing, oh, it's challenging to just be in this body and have this mind. But then, as we reflect on it, and particularly with a practice like this, we're reminded that, well, this experience, this challenge that I face is not unique to me. It's not my challenge. It's not personal. It's universal. And to look around and realize, you know, when you're in the airport or in a crowded space and see every person here has challenges in their life. Some of them great challenges, right? Whether they're physical or mental, relationships. And to feel that wish, to be able to tap into that, oh, just as I wish to be happy, so too do I wish others to be happy. I think it's a really, really important thing to connect with, and it's certainly another sort of central Buddhist principle that we should care. You know, I don't often use the word should, try to avoid it generally, but that really it's appropriate. It makes sense to care about all beings, and that caring about them isn't a burden, but is actually something that's fulfilling. It's a rich feeling to feel that connection, to sense that I do care, that there is this caring in me. I might not feel, you know, the oceanic warmth of, you know, love for every being, but when I think of people, you know, and particularly, you know, you can kind of go around the world in your mind and think of people who are at war or, in famine, or you know, you think of your own family, or even of yourself, you know, the physical struggles, the emotional struggles. And it's not that we, you know, carry this around with us all the time, but it's another piece of that sense of spiritual awakening, you know, of really including everything, including everyone, you know, in this, you know, kind of universal way. And it's, again, not to be foolish about it, not that we don't also push against and fight against injustice or people that are doing harm, or that we allow people to walk over us or do us harm, but that in our hearts we try to maintain this caring and this compassion, this understanding. You know, there's one of the sutras that I wrote about in my book, Living Kindness. It's called The Simile of the Saw, in which the Buddha says that even if bandits were sawing off your limbs one by one with a two-handled saw, if a thought of ill will arose in your mind, you would not be doing my practice, you would not be following my teaching. Well, it sounds like a crazy teaching, like people are sawing off my limbs and I'm not angry with them. But this is the other side of loving kindness, that the Buddha is saying that anger and hatred are these poisons that are have no redeeming value, you know, that they are only harmful, that they harm us, that they harm others. He says, you know, when you become angry with your enemy, you are giving your enemy what your enemy wants, because you are creating your suffering for yourself. And that's presumably what your enemy wants, is for you to suffer. Compassionate action. Yeah. So this then takes us to this other reflection, and you know, my book Living Kindness was really an effort to kind of bring some of the nuances out of this practice of loving kindness that I think gets too much focused on trying to feel love and not enough about letting go of hatred, of anger. One of the ways the Buddha teaches, which really started to strike me some years ago, is that he often uses the negative to make a point. So he talks about non-ill will, non-hatred, maybe just as often as he talks about compassion and loving kindness. So it's an interesting contrast if you think about saying you should love everybody versus just don't hate anybody. And I find the second much more accessible. Like, oh yeah, I can just not get into, like, I might not be able to feel this thing for you, but I can hold back from getting into that hostile, destructive energy. And so he often uses this kind of terminology: non-self, non-ill will, non-hatred, non-craving, you know. And one of the ways this works, when you think about what's his core teaching, is let go. So instead of saying, you know, get this thing going, get love going, or, you know, he says, just let go. of the hatred. And because when you say you should feel this or you should behave in this way, then it becomes this striving. It can become this striving to try to attain something. I'm supposed to feel this, I'm supposed to be concentrated, No, just let go of the things that block your concentration. Don't, try to create concentration. I should be loving. No, just let go of the hatred of what's there. Well, kindness is there. It's natural. So this way of working, using the negative, actually correlates with his prime teaching of letting go. So, but let me go back to this simile of the saw. Even if your limbs are being sawed off, as I worked on this book and I was writing about that, I went and met with one of my teachers, a monk named Ajahn Pasano. And I said, this sutta seems to suggest that we should just be passive in the face of violence. And he said, you have to read it more carefully. He's saying, even if your mind, if a thought of ill will arises, that's what you're trying to cultivate. It's not the behavior, not that you're supposed to let people saw your limbs off, because the sutta actually starts with this story about a monk who, as it says in the sutta, has been associating overmuch with the nuns. So the monks aren't really supposed to associate overmuch with the nuns. And this monk, Molya Fuguna, is like getting into fights with people, arguments with people, when they're saying mean things about the nuns. And the Buddha says, don't, even if people are attacking the nuns, don't let your mind get caught up in hatred. And again, it doesn't say don't protect them physically, but he says don't let your mind get caught up in hatred. And wow, it's again like what an order, I can't go through with it kind of, but it's again to me a really beautiful teaching. Even as we, and it really applies. It's a great one to apply to political protest. When we look at Martin Luther King and Gandhi, this is the principle that they're coming out of, the nonviolence, right? We're going to stand up for justice, but we're not going to do it violently. We're going to do it with love, right? We're going to do it out of love. It's coming out of love. We're not doing this because we hate you, but because we love justice. And we love, people. We believe people deserve this. And so it's that critical distinction. It's like, the anti-war protesters who were, spitting on the returning military. It's like, that's not, you're just acting in the same way, right? That you're acting with hatred. You don't fight war with war. That's like the classic, teaching from the Dhammapada, that hatred will never end by hatred, but by love alone. It's the ancient and eternal law. So, again, this is like it's a beautiful teaching, which is inspiring, but it's something to be practiced, not just to be, thought about, right? Like, because we're not doing it, again, the Buddha, there's a classic, a quotation from the Buddha where he just says, I just teach about suffering and the end of suffering. So this isn't even about morality per se, or being good or spiritual. It's anger and hatred harms you, So it's a selfish action. It turns out to be wholesome and beneficial for, the world, but we start with this, selfish motivation. So we're not doing it. Oh, I'm supposed to be good. I'm not supposed to get angry. Oh, it's really bad when I get angry. Oh, I'm a bad boy. No, it's like, how does it feel? Now, this is another reason why I point so much to feeling in practice, because feeling will almost always tell you when you're in balance and when you aren't in balance. And it'll be the mindfulness bell for you. Oh, I'm getting worked up. I'm getting angry. That's not helpful. That hurts me right now. But then if I act on it, it starts to, spread that. So we try to stay in touch on the feeling level and tap into this wish for all beings to be free from suffering. So we can see that these different aspects of this practice are kind of creating a worldview, a way of being, and there's different ways into it. And what's interesting is that the mindfulness and loving kindness are often taught as separate practices, and they sort of did that today, but they're not really separate practices. If you practice mindfulness without kindness, it becomes this kind of regimented self-evaluation moment by moment. What am I doing right now? What am I experiencing? My mind is wandering. If you practice loving kindness without mindfulness, it can become this kind of dreamy, may all beings be happy, but there's no real connection to the humanity of it, the reality of it. So in my practice, I really think of these two as being integrated. That when I'm sitting, and if I start to get into a negative mind state, and I realize it, then I try to soften and bring in just a feeling, not even necessarily any words or images, but just a feeling of caring and gentleness toward myself. And this is where the practice of self-compassion comes from, which is maybe the next piece to this puzzle. Self-compassion is really inherent to Buddhist practice, but it was kind of isolated as a particular view and a particular way of approaching meditation by a woman named Kristen Neff, who's a psychologist and teaches at University of Texas. I don't know if that's okay.
They need it.
Yeah. So, yeah. But it's this. It's quite. If it's something that interests you, she has a book just called Self-Compassion that's very good. And I suspect some of you are already familiar with it. But if you just practice mindfulness and watch your experience for a while, and try to understand it in the context of the Four Noble Truths of suffering and the causes of suffering and the end of suffering, that there's a way in which you naturally arrive at the idea of being kind to yourself. Because you start to see, these negative thoughts are just making me feel bad. My self-judgments they have no value. They're not of use. They're not helping me. They're just making me feel bad about myself. And I'm a human being. I'm a flawed human being, that redundant statement, right? I'm a human being, so of course I make mistakes. That doesn't mean I uniquely deserve to be punished. in fact, as much as anyone else, I deserve love. I deserve care. So this is just sort of like something that I think if you sit and practice enough, this kind of like becomes clear. You're like, well, what am I doing? Why am I sitting here beating myself up? I thought I was meditating in order to, I don't know, find peace or awaken or something. You know, I wasn't meditating to learn what a bad person I am, and you know how much I hate myself. So, and then putting together the understanding of the Four Noble Truths, which is that life is difficult, and I'm not somebody who's uniquely flawed, so I should have compassion for myself, because it's hard to sit here and watch this mind, and it's hard to be in this mind, and it's hard to be in this body. And so if I'm with someone else who's struggling, who's suffering, what's my reaction to it? It's care and compassion for them. So it naturally, it follows that I would give that to myself, because I see that I too, just like them, struggle with having a mind and a body. So this compassion, self-compassion, if you will. And then I also think of, the partner of that is forgiveness. Because again, mistakes and failure is just built into the game. You're meditating, you're trying to pay attention to your breath, your mind naturally goes off. When you come back, do you say to yourself, oh, I'm such an idiot, what's wrong with me that I'm having thoughts? Or do you think, oh, well, that's what human beings do, I forgive myself? That makes more sense, just logically. So to me, I try to have compassion and forgiveness. I like to say it as they're my partners in my meditation. I have them with me, sitting with me. So as I sit and stuff happens in my mind, that they're received with this compassion and forgiveness. Oh, yeah. Well, that's difficult. And I'm okay. So this is how this practice of loving kindness that's, outward and then turns inward